My metaphysics, let me be perfectly frank with you, are that there is the central self. You can call it God, you can call it anything you like. And it's all of us. It's playing all the parts of all beings whatsoever, everywhere and anywhere. And it's playing the game of hide and seek with itself. It gets lost, it gets involved in the farthest out adventures, but in the end, it always wakes up and comes back to itself. And when you're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up.
Hi, Sarah.
And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a little, poor little me.
Chew your banana.
Meaning would imply a plan or a reason that you're created, and everything is unplanned, and life has no purpose or meaning because you don't choose to be born. You just are, and you have to make do with what you got. If you chose to be born, then you would choose to be doing something, which would give you an objective. But you're not given an objective if you don't choose in the first place. Growing up, I have had a lot of religious thoughts or just inquiries.
Influences.
Yes, and just in general, I've never really believed in Mormonism or any really Christianity. I was always like, there's something more, like, what is up with the universe? Like, I've always been like, what came before this, and what came before that, and what came before that? Like, how can anything be possible? How can you say one thing is true? Like, what came before that truth? Blah, blah, blah. So, like, I've always been very unsure of what anything means in terms of universe.
We confuse ourselves as living organisms with our idea of ourselves. That is to say, with a conception of myself which is called the personality or ego. That is what we have been told we are. And it's an extremely crude and limited conception of oneself, of the actual unique living organism. And we get unhappy because we're thinking of ourselves in this way, because we think, well, gee, I'm going to die.
What I imagine is that we join the force that I believe is out there, and we become part of that. And it's a very good thing that is very. I think we'll be happy to be a part of that force. But that's about the only thing that I really imagine. I think, when people think about seeing their loved ones again and stuff like that, I have no idea if that can really happen, or if you just join that force along with everybody else that you love and all the other people that you didn't even know, all those other beings. And it's just a really great, amazing thing to be a part of that.
Most people nowadays say, I have no time. Of course you don't. Because you are not aware of the present. The present is represented on your watch by a hairline that is as thin as possible, as is consistent with visibility. And so everybody thinks the present is, instead of, now, the present is the only real time. There is no past, and there isn't a future. And there never will be.
I have to force myself to find value and meaning in the work I do, or the, obligations that I have in my life, things like that. But what I do find a lot of value in, my relationships with other people, pretty much, it's the sense that I can verify for sure that the things that the relationships that I've had, exist, right? Those are some of the only things that I know exist. If because it's an idea and it's not a thing in the world that will eventually decay, and not exist, because it's an abstraction, that's one of the only things that I can have the exact same way I have with a human, with an animal, or with a plant, is a real relationship where I care for and nurture it, or where they care for and nurture me. That's an interaction that's testable, and you can see the results afterwards. Just like nurturing and caring is changing your environment or affecting it in a way that is observable and testable afterwards. If you can see the results of something, doesn't that kind of make it real?
We inherit a conception of ourselves as being artifacts, as being made, and it is perfectly natural in our culture for a child to ask its mother, "How was I made?" or "Who made me?" And this is a very, very powerful idea, but, for example, it is not shared by the Chinese or by the Hindus. A Chinese child would not ask its mother, "How was I made?" A Chinese child might ask its mother, "How did I grow?" which is an entirely different procedure from making. You see, when you make something, you put it together, you arrange parts, or you work from the outside to the in, as a sculptor works on a stone, or as the potter works on clay. But when you watch something growing, it works in exactly the opposite direction. It works from the inside to the outside. It expands, it burgeons, it blossoms, and it happens all over itself at once. In other words, the original simple form, say, of a living cell in the womb, progressively complicates itself. And that's the growing process, and it's quite different from the making process. And so there is, for that reason, a fundamental difference between the made and the maker.
The most important thing.
The number, if you could choose any one thing that you find to be the most important in living life.
I want to say that to achieve a good balance in your life, a balance of coming to terms with everything that you need to come to terms with, and balancing health and job and the relationships and so forth. A good balance is, to me, is extremely important. And to not do any harm, I definitely do not want to do harm, and be kind. I want to be kind to dogs, to cats, to people, and not do harm. But the balance is the thing that always strikes me as so important to have a satisfactory life. You can get unbalanced and it causes problems if you can find a balance and be happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is it's hard to find it yourself if your parents haven't given you a couple things to start with. satisfied in terms of not being tormented by whatever, to achieve that situation where the way you're leading your life makes you happy, does not torment you, does not lead you in destructive ways. I think that's what you're trying to achieve.
I love that.
Do you define yourself as a victim of the world or as the world? You can define yourself. You see, if you identify you with what you call the voluntary system of the nerves and say, only that's me, and that's really a rather limited amount of my total performance, what I do voluntarily, then you've defined yourself as the victim in the game. And so you are able to feel that life was a trap. Something else, whether it was God or whether it was fate or whether it was the big mechanism, the system, imposed this on you. And you can say, poor little me. But you can equally well, and with just as much justification, define yourself not only as what you do voluntarily, but also what you do involuntarily. That's you too. Do you beat your heart or don't you? Or does it just happen to you? And if you define yourself as the works, then nobody's imposing on you. You're not a victim. You're doing it.